Welcome to The Next Stage, the podcast where we turn up the house lights on the future of venue management. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, this is your go-to source for the latest trends, innovations, and best practices in the venue and event management industry.
The amount of information and the amount of change and the amount of opportunity has never been greater.
We've literally broken down walls and we're looking at how can we create a more seamless experience.
There's customer demand for sustainability now.
On the forefront when it comes to venues that might not look like what you think of as a venue today.
Welcome back to The Next Stage. I'm your host, VMA CEO Joel Edmondson, and with me today is Natalie O'Brien, CEO, Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. Welcome, Natalie.
Thanks for having me, Joel.
Natalie, it's fantastic to have you here today to talk about a shared passion of ours, venue accessibility. I'd love if you just begin by talking a little bit about where your passion for venue accessibility comes from and why you believe it's so important to the future of MCEC.
Yes, we definitely share the passion of accessibility. And 2 years ago as a team and a board, we came together and we came up with our purpose for being. The reason why we come to work every day is that we're a welcoming place for people to share ideas, build communities and leave legacies. And in that we mean everybody, people from near and far and people with all sorts of needs. And we want this place to be really accessible. And I think as we all reflect, whether it's in our own family or friends or our own community, is that we all have somebody that we're connected with, and how do we really understand and appreciate what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes as a venue. How do we make sure that we are accessible to everyone?
It strikes me in your description of the way you've come up with your purpose there that's inherently tied to the basic notion of customer service and customer experience. So the walking in the shoes of your customer, I imagine, can only be enhanced by taking an accessibility-based approach.
100%. And we feel very proud to be the custodian of this venue. And it is about how we are accessible to all of our customers and how we understand that the needs of the customers can be different, and that we are really wanting to put ourselves forward to make sure that we are connecting with customers where they're at.
And I imagine that extends into every facet of the venue's operation. Do you want to speak a little bit about the sort of breadth of this? Because I think people often, think about ramps, for example, but, accessibility is so much more deep and comprehensive than that.
Absolutely. I think in our venues, the first thing that we look at is physical barriers, and that is indeed really important. And whether that's access through the doors, the placement of furniture in spaces, the width of furniture, back of house facilities, toilets, and all of those things are super important. But I guess what we're appreciating even more importantly is actually understanding that many disabilities are hidden disabilities, and how do we make sure that we treat every single person that comes into the building with the respect that they deserve. And it may be something that we don't quite see, that these people need extra help. And so there is the physical side, but there's also the side where we lean in and that we have a culture of understanding and being supportive of different needs, even if we can't see them.
And I assume as well that extends into your staff cohort as well, because the venue accessibility isn't just about the patron, but it's also about the fact that statistically these kind of challenges people have in their lives, like it's not restricted to people who attend events. It's also people who run them, isn't it?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've introduced is a global program called the Hidden Disabilities Sunflower. And that's just really a short training course that can be done online, where our staff can wear that pin, but also people who have perhaps a hidden disability also wear the pin, and so that there's sort of breaking down a barrier for people to lean in and to be able to support each other. So that's one program that we've introduced. One of the areas that I think, and in terms of the journey, I feel like whilst there are certainly things that we are doing and we have an action plan, there are many, many things that we need to do. And one of the areas that we really need to break into is our employees. Many of our back of house areas are not suitable for accommodating the needs of our employees. And so you're right. We look at how do we best serve and make our space accessible for customer, but I feel like we've got a bit of work to do in regard to our employees.
And look, these are all, it's a perpetual game in a sense of, trying to, the more knowledge that we have, the more adaptation needs to happen, and that kind of never stops. So I'm sure in your role, that's kind of a reality that you live every day. And to do that, you need the right structure and governance in place. MCEC's recently established the country's first permanent accessibility advisory committee. Can you talk to me about how that came about, who's on the committee, what its purpose is?
Yeah, so we are super delighted to bring together a group of people that will be an extension of our team that come with various disabilities and lenses. And the purpose of bringing this group together is that we can be made aware of some of the challenges and lived experience of our accessibility committee, and how we can then develop an action plan from that feedback and consultation that we're hearing from them. And then also together as a group, look at innovative solutions of how we're going to resolve for some of those barriers that we currently have. So it's about a month ago that we came together as a group, and I think one of the most important thing is that we have many of our senior leaders are also part of that group, because we want to make sure that this is embedded across the whole organisation.
Fantastic. And in terms of that integration, how does the committee exist in relationship to the organisation in terms of ensuring that effective action comes out of their engagement?
Yeah, so what we're proposing with the committee, we have developed an action plan. And I guess ultimately the success of that action plan are how many actions are actioned. And so the mechanism of reporting that through is through quarterly reporting back to the leadership team and then through to the board. And I think with all of these things, this accessibility plan is something that's very much endorsed and supported by the board. So this comes from top down and grassroots, and also bringing people inside our organisation to help us see some of the barriers we might not understand or appreciate ourselves.
And I suppose it's that's challenging, expanding the definition of accessibility in terms of people having access to influencing what the organisation and the venue is doing, and creating that more porous relationship between the customer and the audience and the venue itself.
Yeah, and I think, Joel, recently we sponsored a disability conference here at the centre, and it really was an opportunity to hear from various businesses, venues, organisations. It was specific to our sector in terms of the sorts of changes, ideas, solutions that they've had. And I think that the more that we can share and the more that we can learn from each other, I think one of the learnings that we have from that conference as the venue host is that we didn't send a feedback survey that was specifically about what were the challenges for some of the delegates in terms of accessing this centre. But certainly through the course of the conference, we were able to hear anecdotally some of the things about our venue that weren't as accessible as we may have thought. And there's certainly things that are added to the action sheet as well.
So there's a few key actions that I'm aware of that it'd be good to drill into. One is the Changing Places facility. So this is a facility for high support needs. Can you share more about, tell us a little bit more about the Changing Places facility, and then maybe if you could talk a little bit about the community's role in shaping the facility.
Yes, so I guess one of the things with a building that is a building that's has been around for a while is making sure that we can create spaces that are accessible for people. So with this particular project, it was a grant that was submitted in, and we were able to take some real estate that was previously a bathroom, a parent's room, and another quiet space, and turn it into a Changing Places facility. And I guess what was really important to everyone was that this space was a space that really had the aesthetics and would be really comfortable for the users of this space. And it was a special partnership with a design team who had very close association with lived experience through their own family. And so it feels like this space has got extra care and attention in terms of the aesthetics, the colours, the textures, the extra spaces and comfortable seating for extended family that, would be adjacent to the Changing facilities. So the Changing facility opened about 4 months here, and we also are proud that this will be a facility that will be able to be used by people that are at this end of the city and beyond just our venue.
Fantastic. And where is it located in the venue?
So the facility is located quite close to the customer service desk in, I guess you'd say, the western end of the building. And so very accessible. It's all on lower ground for families to be able to use this space. One of the other little suggestions from the designer was, because when somebody's using the Changing facilities, they will be looking largely at the roof. And the suggestion is that perhaps we have some sort of mural on the roof. And that's something that we're really keen to follow up and to be able to add to the space as well.
Do you want, it might not be obvious to everyone, but do you want to talk a little bit about why the aesthetic being warm and inviting is essential in the design of a space like this?
Yeah, so the feedback from the different people that we spoke about in terms of what the space should feel and be like was that quite often those sorts of facilities felt very cold and sparse and unfriendly.
Like a hospital room.
Like a hospital room.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so the idea was, and it's this beautiful sage green and beautiful colours and beautiful lighting in there, and the textures of the furniture in there, to make this a space that really feels comfortable for the person that's using the space.
And how many people can use it at any one time?
So it can only be used for one person at a time.
Yep.
To be able to use that, and essentially anyone wanting to use it would just report into the customer service desk so that they can manage the use of the space.
Great. So moving on now, I might just flip back to the Accessible and Inclusive Tourism Conference that you referred to before. The venue partnered with Travellers Aid to enhance the attendee experience. Do you want to talk a little bit about what Travellers Aid is and your work together?
Absolutely. Late last year, we did host an Accessible and Inclusive Tourism conference that brought leaders to the centre to again put on the agenda and share how we can be more accessible as a venue inside a destination, and how the whole ecosystem can work together. So we partnered with Travellers Aid, which is an organisation that's been around for many years, and effectively Travellers Aid is a service that will help in unique ways for our visitors or guests or delegates to make their way to the centre. So for some people, that was collecting them from the hotel room and bringing them into the centre. And without that support, some of our guests and delegates would not have been able to get to the conference. It included the use of wheelchairs and mobility, moving people from different parts around the building. And I think at this particular conference, we had 17 of our delegates that were using the Traveller's Aid service. And this is a service that is also available at the train stations and helps some of our visitors and delegates come from regional centres around the state as well.
And Traveller's Aid, so is that a service that the venue can access for an event, like any other venue could do for an event?
Absolutely. So other events like the Australian Open and the Flower and Garden Show that might have a demographic that may be less mobile can reach out to Traveller's Aid and partner up and support the particular event. On any other day, Traveller's Aid has networks close to train stations, particularly Southern Cross Station here in Melbourne, to be able to give mobility to visitors coming in through the train station.
What are your big takeaways from the partnership in terms of thinking about future events at MCEC? What are the things that you think will stay with you having had this partnership?
I think one of the great learnings is that we are a venue inside a destination, inside an ecosystem, and partnership is going to be really, really important for us to make not only our venues accessible, but our destination, our city, our country more accessible for people. And I think the learnings from the conference are that it's really important for us to share information. It's really important for us to share what we've heard and what we've learned, what we've trialed that's worked or hasn't worked. And I think the more that we can share, the greater accessibility that we can create for everyone.
And I know that you're travelling for the VMA Congress this year and won't be available, but maybe next year this is something that we could, bring to the broader venue industry as a conversation because, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast with you today is that accessibility is a bit of a black box for a lot of not just venues, but really, our whole economy and society is sort of very still kind of marginalised and poorly understood. So, yeah, we're at the VMA, we're very keen to get as much knowledge and insight out there as possible. You spoke about the importance of partnership then, and you were telling me before we came on today about your long-term relationship with the City of Melbourne in this space. Do you want to speak a little bit about what you've gained from that partnership where accessibility is concerned?
Yeah, so really embracing the idea of partnership is the City of Melbourne has, since 1999, working on making sure the city itself is accessible. And that really stems from accessibility in terms of physical ramps, wayfinding, the use of technologies for translation and those sorts of things. But it stems even further. The City of Melbourne have visitor services offers around the streets to be able to help and to guide people, and are also trained in terms of connecting with people. The City of Melbourne has also created a number of terrific checklists for businesses to use maybe as a starting point to say, how do I stack up against this checklist? And City of Melbourne has been sponsoring a new conference that we hosted only last month that in its first year had a couple of hundred attendees, and this year, had in excess of 300 people. And really it was an opportunity to share the learnings and case studies, and in some instances share some pretty disappointing feedback in terms of disrespected disrespected in venues for simple things that we could work on together. And that would include perhaps people not understanding the hidden disabilities and treating people like they had, were over enjoying and those sorts of things. So I think there's a massive education opportunity. And I think the partnership that we've spoken about is really important. How, as an industry, do we continue to chair and share? And the feedback's really important. We've learned a lot of things post the conference in terms of some of the physical customer service desk is too high. I had one gorgeous participant who was talking about she had a carer dog and that we didn't have an appropriate space for the carer dog to go to. The other learning, Joel, was that if you do have accessibility issues or disabilities, the research that you usually do before coming to a venue is quite significant. And are our websites have enough information to give somebody the comfort that they'll be able to access the right room, the directions will be there, there'll be a quiet space if they need to break out into a quiet space, there'll be an accessible toilet for them to go, and that they won't feel embarrassed or uncomfortable about coming to the venue. And so the more that we can get together as an industry and a sector and start sharing that feedback and the case studies that have worked, I think that we can do a great job in lifting our accessibility.
I think a lot about neurodiversity as a hidden disability, and a lot of neurodiverse people don't want to consider themselves disabled in inverted commas, but an increasing number of people are being diagnosed with ADHD, autism, mixture of the two. There's other types of neurodiversity in there as well. And, like one of the wicked problems for venues, I think, is events are designed to be highly stimulating. But particularly for people on the autistic spectrum, that level of stimulation can be overwhelming. So, I think it really challenges us as an industry to think very laterally about the way events are presented to accommodate neurodiversity. And I think that's probably the next frontier.
Absolutely. And I think, how do we do it creatively in terms of green spaces or outdoor spaces or spaces where people can breathe, or, just the opportunity. And I love what some of the venues have been doing with, some of the children being able to go to sporting events and be able to enjoy the buzz and the excitement of the event. But also, if it gets too much, there is a space for them to step out and, be calm and be quiet, but also not miss out on the opportunity. And I think there's some great work happening in the space. And sometimes we are challenged with physical space and having the opportunity. But how do we think creatively about how we might be able to create different zones?
The other one that is more kind of radical and out there, but I think in time we'll get to the point where this is normalised, is the idea that economic inequality is a form of disability, is that you do not have access to particular experiences because of your station in a society where it's hard to get ahead, everything costs more, and you can't do things. I mean, do you think that it might be possible that at some point we have kind of an approach to accessibility in that respect that opens up creative ways for people to access events who, otherwise can't afford to?
I think it's a really interesting angle on accessibility in another way. And at the recent conference, I was mentioning City of Melbourne, as producers of events in their own venues, have really taken a lead in that space. And so they have offered FOC or pay it forward, buy a ticket and bring somebody else. And also, Joel, extending to, making sure that there are free tickets for carers to be able to go as well. And so I think that there's definitely some work in that space to make sure that what we're offering in our venues is accessible to people that might not otherwise be able to attend.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And I think in the long term, it's smart commercially to open up access to your venue to people who might not otherwise initially have the means to, because they might in future, and getting them in the habit of coming to things and attending is, yeah, it's a more lateral way of building your future customer base, I think.
Absolutely. And, I look out my window today and see a whole bunch of school kids, which I just love because it's the future generation of people attending our buildings. And, because they come in school groups, quite often they possibly wouldn't necessarily come with their family. But, I think that's another form of accessibility as well, is, bringing groups, particularly children who will be the future customers for our venues.
Are there, given that, young people are tech natives, from a technology perspective, are there new ideas that you're seeing out there that could enhance the experience for guests with diverse accessibility needs?
I think in terms of technology, it will be the future of the next generation of how they're going to absorb events. I feel like it's a watch space, and we're continuing to explore how we look at hybrid technology and the idea of meeting. And I think that's interesting in the context of the fact that children coming through school and university now have had a period of time where there's been isolation, and we know loneliness and anxiety has been a really prevalent across the younger sector. So it'll be interesting about how do we curate inside our venues where we're looking at the mix of technology, but also this idea of coming together and exchanging ideas and being in front of each other. And, I feel like that's something that we all really need to be focused on. What does that mix look like? I think if we all could get our children off their tablets and their technology a little bit more and introduce that face-to-face communication, I think that's going to be important in terms of how we curate inside our venues.
You mentioned the sunflower pin before, and that just triggered me to tell you that at Congress this year, we're for the first time running an innovation hub where we've had 20 entertainment industry startups apply to showcase. And it's really about getting startups at an early phase to get into a dialogue with their end customer. And one of the 4 startups that's been chosen is called Sunflower AI, and it's an accessibility tool for venues to do live audio transcription for business events and conferences using AI. So as the person on stage speaks, you get a feed on the screen of the words. So yeah, it's just an interesting synchronicity with the sunflower metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you mentioned AI, Joel, that clearly we are seeing that integrated in terms of how content is quickly returned to delegates and how content is creatively made into rap songs and all sorts of things in terms of certain sectors. So, I guess it goes to the fact that, all senses and how do events, continue to be multi-sensory, and what is the interface with technology in that delivery as well.
Natalie, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Before we go, is there one big aspiration or next big step for the MCEC in terms of accessibility? What's getting you excited every day?
Wow, I think we are at the start of the journey, and I think that if we can advocate and share to other people, I think the thing that I would like to say that we've really been able to work on is how do we have a more accessible working place for employees, and how do we offer opportunities for both volunteers and employees to work inside the great industry that we get the privilege to be part of each day.
Fantastic. Natalie, thank you so much for joining me today on The Next Stage. And everyone, we will see you next fortnight. All the best.